Call to order the Senate Interior Appropriations Subcommittee. Secretary Burgum, good morning. Welcome to the committee. It's good to have you here to discuss the President's fiscal year 2026 budget request for the Department of Interior. I'm pleased to have the opportunity today to talk about the important work that the department does, including its leading role in supporting America's energy agenda, empowering Indian country and tribal nations, providing recreational opportunities to tens of millions of Americans, and generating billions of dollars in economic output. It's been a real pleasure. I have appreciated the meetings that we've had, the conversations that we've had by phone, and it's been great to meet the various assistant secretary nominees from the department. I've enjoyed our conversations there. I'm impressed by their understanding of the issues that they focus on and their commitment to public service. You're building out quite the team. It was great to be able to talk to Kate McGregor. She has a little bit of history with the department and comes with a lot of knowledge and understanding, and certainly on Alaska-related issues. So we're eager to get her confirmed and to work, as well as some of the other nominees. We're still waiting for some of the key ones. As the chairman of the Indian Affairs Committee, we're anxious to have a nominee for the Bureau of Indian Affairs as well. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you. I want to thank President Trump for recognizing Alaska's amazing natural resource potential. This was very significant in the Day 1 executive order. Everything from the Ambler Road to the NPRA, our non-wilderness coastal plain, Alaska LNG. But there's been very swift, very early and decisive action in this space, and it's welcome both here in Washington, D.C., and certainly in my state. So I'm looking forward to working with you to further facilitate the development of Alaska's resource. I know you are looking forward to going to Alaska in just a couple weeks. Hopefully, it's going to be a great trip, lots of good information, good feedback, and good weather, and I'm hopeful that Denali will be out in all of its majesty and splendor, and you'll be reminded why Alaskans prefer the Koyukon Athabascan name Denali, meaning the Great One. The President and you have set out an ambitious agenda, particularly with respect to the focus on energy and economic development. I'm very supportive of this endeavor and know that I want to be your partner in achieving so many of the goals. But beyond the actual resource development, the Department of Interior can be an economic force for good in many different ways. And one of the most important economic drivers that we see up in Alaska, aside from the resource end of things, is within the department, within the national parks system. National parks is the home states of the members on this subcommittee and generates a collective $7.4 billion of economic output annually. That's more than the gross domestic product of 40 different countries. But it's not just the economic output that makes parks so important. It's the experiences of traveling to parks, seeing the wildlife, having an adventure that creates a lifetime of memories. And we've had discussions about some of your early years and the significance of that. Back home in Alaska, we've already had about 150,000 people come through on cruise ships this year. That might not surprise other people, but this is early for us. We estimate a total of 1.65 million visitors for the tourism season. That's about double the population of our state. So when we see a skinny budget that proposes to cut $1.2 billion or 35% from Park Service, it's hard to square it with the claims that DOI is focused on fostering the American economy, again, recognizing that our economy is more than just our natural resource development. Another area of concern that I will address in my questions within the National Park Service budget proposal is the concept of turning over management of national parks to the states. I'm trying to figure out exactly how this would work, and I'm kind of thinking it's like me putting my kids in charge of the upkeep for the house that I own. In some instances, it might make good sense, but as a wholesale best practice, I worry about how that might impact the parks or our people. So should this concept be included in the full budget request, I'd hope that we have a really thorough conversation with you to better understand the justification for the proposal. I am concerned about what the skinny budget proposes for the BIA and the BIE. Cutting nearly $1 billion from Indian Affairs would hurt the federal government's ability to meet its trust responsibility to Native people. And in some of our conversations, I've shared some of the areas where I think the department has failed Indian country, and this is in areas like probate, where we have an extraordinary backlog, public safety and justice, missing and murdered Indigenous people, as well as the education of Native American children. And while I appreciate that the skinny budget alleges that proposed cuts would enable tribes to focus on law enforcement, I'm not sure how reducing BIA law enforcement funding by $107 million is treating the program as a core priority of tribes. I know, because I hear it, tribes have been requesting more support for this program to address a serious lack of policing. So I worry that cuts of this magnitude can't be made up for by directing tribes to apply for grants at DOJ as the skinny budget suggests. I want to end my opening comments this morning by talking about what I consider to be, and I know that you put equal priority to, and that's the men and women of the department, the people who actually make things happen. We've talked about a lot of good ideas for using new systems, IT systems, artificial intelligence, how we can make the department more efficient. These are good goals, worthy goals, and I hope to see that detailed more in the budget. But I think we know when we're talking about management of our public lands, if you don't have the necessary staff, whether out in the field or in the headquarters, all the investments that we want to make become less efficient. When I think about the executive order as it relates specifically to Alaska, we've got some good things that we want to do up north when it comes to resource development. But scientific and ecological assessments that are provided by USGS are relied upon by not just federal land management agencies, but by the industry as well. So USGS science helps avoid polar bear duns, identify permafrost, map caribou migration patterns. So when we see cuts to USGS, but also BLM and BOEM and Bessie and Osmery, it causes me to wonder, are we going to be able to accomplish what we're all seeking to accomplish together? I think it's important also that people have expertise and knowledge about the places that they serve. I had this conversation with folks in the Forest Service. You just can't take somebody who maybe comes from Indianapolis, a good Forest Service person, but you put them out at the Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center where their job is bear management. They don't have a clue about bear management. We want to make sure that we're making good and smart decisions. I know you're probably going to get a lot of questions today about staffing cuts and how that is going to impact the operations of the department, not just here in Washington, but around the country. I do wish that the Acting Assistant Secretary for Policy, Management, and Budget, Mr. Hassan, is not here today to answer some of these questions, because he seems to be in charge of making a lot of the decisions about the staffing and the reorg. I'm hoping that he is going to be in a position to be more responsive to my staff about some of the questions that we have raised. But ultimately, and you know, you've been a governor, you know the buck stops with you. He can be responsible for certain things, but ultimately it's you that are accountable. So getting the answers to questions about the reorganizations, the impacts of RIFs, how the department will operate national parks, protect reserves, and implement the president's energy agenda. So getting this channel of communication going back and forth in a good and a constructive way, I think, is going to be important. But my bottom line to you this morning is I'm pleased with your nomination. I'm excited that you are there at the department. I'm really excited about the shift that we're seeing in Alaska, where the department has really gone from being a problem to being a partner in so many different areas. So looking forward to what we're going to be able to do together. With that, I'll turn to Senator Merkley.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Murkowski, and welcome, Secretary Burgum. Mr. Secretary, I am just astonished, and not in a good way, by all we have seen over the last 4 months at the Interior Department. Coming into this second Trump administration, I feared that Interior would open up more lands to drilling and mining, deepening our addiction to fossil fuels, and ignoring the growing impact of climate chaos. And of course, that chaos has huge consequences for the health of our public lands. And that fear was justified. Despite the U.S. operating at an all-time high for energy production and more than 19 million leased acres sitting idle across the country, that's 46% of the onshore acres and 79% of the offshore acres. Yet the administration lied to the American people and declared a bogus energy emergency. And now you're expediting fossil fuel permitting and dropping protections for vast swaths of public lands while restricting renewable energy production. You don't have an all-the-above energy policy, you have a fossils above all policy, and one that hurts our future. I also feared that a second Trump administration would undermine the Endangered Species Act in order to pave the way for industry and developers to not have to be bothered by protecting species on the brink of extinction or the health of their ecosystems. And right on time, the Department proposed a change to the Endangered Species Act, declaring that habitat destruction doesn't count when it comes to harming species. But, Mr. Secretary, I never expected to see, not even for a second, an administration that would fire or push out under threat hundreds of dedicated public lands employees, including firefighters and park rangers, who keep us safe and protect our national treasures. I never expected to see an administration openly propose to offload vast numbers of national park sites onto the states, fracturing our treasured system with an eye on profit rather than preserving our collective heritage. I never expected to see an administration brazenly violate bipartisan congressional direction written into law by holding back funds for state and tribal historic preservation offices, national heritage areas, international anti-poaching groups, and volunteer trail groups. I never expect to see an administration that would callously propose to forsake our treaty and trust responsibilities to sovereign tribal nations. In your confirmation hearing, you said how proud you were as governor of the strong partnership you had with tribes in North Dakota. We don't have to wonder what tribes think today about your proposal to cut core tribal programs for road maintenance, for public safety, for social services, and other vital services nearly in half, or cut tribal school administration by 80% in a system with $1 billion in deferred maintenance and dozens of schools in desperate condition. A broad coalition of organizations from across Indian country serving tribal nationals and tribal citizens sent you a letter on April 11th calling these cuts absolutely unacceptable and that they, quote, undermine the sacred promises made by the United States to tribal nations. Madam Chair, I'd like to submit that letter for the record.
Without objection.
I never expected to see an administration delay funding for wildfire preparedness and fire red card employees who are trained to fight wildfires, or try to end air and smoke monitoring in national parks as we enter wildfire season. And here we are on the brink of another fire season. You have left us less prepared. Safeguarding endangered species and ecosystems, preserving public lands, supporting tribal nations, protecting against wildfires are fundamental responsibilities of the Department. For the Trump administration, however, it's clear that none of that is sacred. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "There is nothing so American as our national parks. The country belongs to the people." And the environmentalist and novelist Wallace Stenger said, "National parks are the best idea we ever had." If creating the national park system was the best idea we've had, this administration's assault on the national park system is one of the worst. Parks bind us together as a nation. They are shared natural wonders open to all. Parks preserve and show us our shared history, places where we can take pride in what happened there, and places where we can learn how to live up to our ideals. Congress created nearly every national park site by law, not just our crown jewels, but each of the park sites, including sites that aren't part of the capital N, capital P system, like the Oregon Caves system in Oregon. They all deserve recognition, each location is special and part of our national story. But this administration wants to strip down the national park system and hand out the parts. Mr. Secretary, you like to talk about unleashing America's balance sheet, focusing on the mining and exploitation profit potential of our public lands. But accounting for the value of public lands is not as simple as a business spreadsheet. How do you value recharging one's soul on the rim of the Grand Canyon? How do you measure the value of a fourth grader gasping in awe at the unspoiled natural wonder of Crater Lake in Oregon? Or of an adult who watched civil rights marches on TV in the 60s, walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, and reliving the fight for racial equality and remembering Bloody Sunday, 1965. This administration talks about public lands like they're just a transaction, available for wheeling trade or for sale. But they are not just a transaction. They are part of the soul of this nation. They are to be celebrated, protected, and passed on to the next generation and the generation after. Our national park sites, our national wildlife refuges, our national landscape conservation system belong to the American people. They are not for sale. So today I'll try to dive deeper into the shocking strategy of selling off America's treasures, destroying endangered species and ecosystems, walking away from our responsibility to the tribes, and the effort to fire dedicated professional federal workers and to freeze funding for parks, nonprofits, and most dangerously, wildfire preparedness. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Merkley. Mr. Secretary, again, welcome to the committee. You have 5 minutes to give us a little bit of the outline here. Your full statement, of course, is included as part of the record, and we look forward to the exchange with members at the conclusion. Please proceed, and welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Murkowski and Ranking Member Merkley. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I look forward to a dialogue on the topics raised during your open comments and other questions that the members may have. So again, thank you for the opportunity to testify relative to this morning to the President Trump's fiscal year 2026 blueprint, budget blueprint. And as we talk about the actions we can take in working with you to make America safer, stronger, more beautiful, and more prosperous. Interior managed resources hold a significant position on Americans' balance sheet. The public lands and minerals within interior domain include more than 480 million acres of surface land, 750 million acres of subsurface mineral estate, and more than 2.5 billion acres offshore. Our natural resources are national assets, and they should be responsibly developed to grow our economy, help us balance the budget, generate revenue for the American taxpayers. With common sense approaches and modern systems, we can increase our return for citizens, strengthen our economy, and create great paying and meaningful jobs, all while protecting our beautiful lands, our abundant wildlife, our clean air and water. The President's 2026 budget blueprint requests $11.9 billion in current authority for the department, which provides significant savings for the American people. Of that, about $10.6 billion of that is within the jurisdiction of this committee. 2026 budget features strategic investments to further President Trump's commitment to energy dominance, which is the foundation of American prosperity, national security, and world peace. Last month, we were working to remove layers of red tape that undermine coal production on federal lands. Clean American coal is a triple win for our country because thermal coal provides reliable and affordable baseload electricity. Metallurgical coal is foundational for bringing back our steel industry, and the mining and refining of our coal that contains critical and rare earth minerals is essential to secure our own domestic supply chains for our defense, transportation, and tech industries. We're also busy rectifying mountains of restrictions designed to restrict resource development in Alaska. And we're increasing the production of affordable, reliable energy on federal lands. We've taken common sense, simple measures to help increase production in the Gulf of America by 100,000 barrels a day, which will help reduce the price at the pump for American families. And we're following the law, and we've proudly announced that we'll have the first lease sale in the newly named Gulf of America that'll occur later this year. Right now, America's in an artificial intelligence arms race with China, and keeping our energy production for electricity, our baseload power production open will help us win this contest while driving down electricity costs for American families. We're also undertaking efforts to establish our position as a leading producer and processor of critical and rare earth minerals, which will create jobs and prosperity at home, strengthen domestic supply chains of the United States and its allies, and reduce the precarious position that we're in relative to China controlling 85% of the refining for rare earth minerals. Preventing and combating wildfires is vitally important to protect people, communities, environment. And the federal wildlife risk mitigation suppression responsibility are split currently across 5 agencies and 2 departments. This creates duplicative and ineffective structures. The budget that you're seeing today reforms wildland fire management to create an operational efficiencies by creating a unified federal wildland fire responsibility that would combine those 5 agencies to help work on suppression, risk mitigation, and coordination with non-federal partners. The Department of Interior upholds federal government's unique trust responsibilities by fostering the government-to-government relations between the federal government and the federally recognized tribes, American Indians, and Alaska Natives. And this budget supports programs at the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Bureau of Education, sustaining the federal government's support for core programs that benefit tribal communities. Since becoming secretary, I've traveled to national parks, historic sites, Bureau of Land Management locations, wildlife refuges, and Bureau of Reclamation sites to learn more and hear from leadership on the ground, hearing from them about the red tape that we put on their lives that get in the way of doing the great work that those team members on the front lines do. We're instituting changes to get more people actually working on the front lines, more minutes on mission, if you will, in the parks, in the firefighting, and we'll be talking more about that today. We're opening more areas to hunting and outdoor recreation. Hundreds of more locations across our wildlife and public lands will be open to help drive tourism, create jobs, and generate revenue for local communities, all while promoting responsible stewardship of our natural resources as we work with conservation, fishing, and hunting groups across the country. Interior is also very focused on streamlining our core business operations, which appears to not have been looked at for decades and decades. This will result in dramatically improved efficiencies and lower costs for American taxpayers. It's going to allow us to take cost out of the budget without affecting any of the operations that we all care about on the ground at the refuges and parks. This budget is about putting America first and doing what's best for the American taxpayer as Interior moves forward. These initiatives set the foundation for a renewed focus on responsible resource management and economic growth. I appreciate that this subcommittee has strongly supported the department's mission. I look forward to working closely with you to advance the President's priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We will begin with a round of questions, 5 minutes apiece, and recognizing members in the order within which they have arrived. I want to start, Mr. Secretary, just where you left off there, which is the extension of an offer to work with members on this committee. I was reminded last week when we had Administrator Zeldin here that many of us have the bat line. We can call the administrator, we can call the secretary, and I have appreciated that engagement. But I think we also recognize that our teams need to be able to have this level of direct communication as well. And so in the effort to make sure that we are following the commitment of transparency, partnership, and responsiveness, I'd like just your commitment on behalf of your staff that we are able to set up at least quarterly meetings with your senior team, our senior approps folks here, to just go through many of the nits and recognizing that quite often we're going to need more than just that, but just this regular communication, particularly at a time when there is so much that is going on right now with a reprogramming, with restructuring, for us to better able to help you. We just need that kind of commitment. So it's worth a minute of my time at the top here to just ask for that public commitment to working with all of us here.
You have that commitment, and again, for those of you that are part of the confirmation process, thank you for continuing to move leaders forward. We're excited about having Kate McGregor start on the Tuesday after Memorial Day. This will be the first of 16 Senate-nominated positions joining Interior, and as the team we got some great candidates. As we get those onboarded, we're going to make sure to be working closely with all of you.
Appreciate that, and we look forward to that. I mentioned how refreshing it is to have an administration that that recognizes the extraordinary potential that we have in Alaska, viewing our resource assets as an asset rather than a liability that needs to be protected against. I've mentioned the executive order unleashing Alaska's extraordinary resource potential. You also had a corresponding secretary's order. I'm hoping that you can share with me an update on the plans to meet implementation goals of this EO and what Alaskans can expect to see in the works for this summer season. And I've mentioned in my opening statements my concern that as we're seeing this significant transition within the department and workforce reduction initiatives, that we're not going to see any of this that happens back here undercutting both the president's and your stated policy goals as they relate to Alaska here.
Well, I think the place I'd like to start, which would be helpful, I think, for all the members of this committee, is to understand that when I came on board, one of the first things that I wanted to understand as an executive was, how many people worked in each bureau and what roles they had and where they were located. Of course, we had a remote working in place when I entered the building after my confirmation. A building here, that headquarters that could hold as many as 3,500 people. There was nobody there. There was the appointees that had come on. There was a custodial staff. And I said, kind of, where is everybody? Well, we got a back to work order that's, coming up. The back to work order occurred later in February, and then we started to have some people trickle into the building. We still have a building that maybe is 1/3 full. I said, well, I thought I'll just go to the systems and find out. Turns out there was no way for me to even send an email to the 65,000 team members across all the bureaus. There wasn't a way to find out how many people worked in each of these bureau agencies. The IT systems are so incredibly outdated. And so then I said, well, let's just start with parks, because that's obviously important to everybody. How many people work in the parks, and how many are permanent, how many are permanent temporary, and how many are summer help. Just trying to find that out was difficult. And then we got a number, about 26,500 people work in the park system. And my next question was, well, how many of them actually physically work in a park? And that answer took almost 8 weeks, because we had to have a group of people pull from all these heterogeneous systems information, because we had a home address where maybe their payroll check is being sent. We didn't, in many cases, even have duty stations for where the people reported to. And then when the number came back, the first number came back was, because I know everyone's just like hair on fire, like, oh, if we cut anybody, we're not going to be able to keep the parks open. The first number got slightly less than 50% of the permanent employees actually work in a park. They're working at a regional headquarters, they're working in some other location, they're working here in headquarters. And so then it was like, well, how many of them work by different functions? Because we always talk about park rangers and wildfire fighters, which we had put as a protected class on all of the orders when I got there, which is don't get rid of any wildland firefighters, don't get rid of any law enforcement. We don't want any of that. So then it comes back, and that of the 65,000 people in Interior, 2,000 of them are listed as being in HR. I didn't hear anybody mention, please protect the HR positions. We got several thousand people working in IT, and I don't know what they do. I'm trying to find out, but I know we've got gobs and gobs of contractors chewing up the budget, and I think that people in IT are hiring contractors to do their work. And so my thesis right up front is for all the mischaracterization and hyperbole that somehow taking a hard look at how we actually operate an agency of this scope and scale, that we can't have a substantial amount of savings both in personnel cost and in dollars, and then actually end up with what all of us want, what all of you want, and what I want. I want more people in the parks. whether they're driving a snowplow in the wintertime or whether they're working with his interpreter in the summertime, or whether we're doing trail work, if they're firefighting, I want more of that. I want less overhead, because when I talk to these park superintendents and I said, how can I make your life more productive? It's not just about, oh, I need more people, more people. Some of these parks, like Yellowstone, have got more people working this summer than they've ever had in the history of the park. Or certainly
Mr.
more than they've
Secretary.
had. So I mean, so we're up from where we were 2 or 3 years ago. And then, but I'm saying, what can I do to help your life be more productive? And they say, get rid of the red tape above me. And so that's one of the things we're working on. And I think so we're listening to the people that are actually on the job doing the operations, and it's just common sense. So I think we can accomplish the goals that were raised by Senator Merkley and others, which is we can get more people actually doing the work and have the savings. Then if I can produce the savings, if I can reinvest those, then into the things that people matter, deferred maintenance.
So I let you go 2 minutes over my time, and I don't want to set that as the standard for the rest of my colleagues, because I understand we have a vote here, I think at 11:30, and I want folks to be able to have multiple rounds. I do think it was kind of important to just lay set the table here for what we're seeing. So I appreciate that. I'm now going to turn to Senator Merkley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Secretary, as you know, we have 63 crown jewels in our national park system. It's when people say, I want to visit every national park, they're normally talking about those crown jewels. But there's 370 other national park sites in the system. And those include, in Oregon, places like the Oregon Caves, the John Day Fossil Beds, the Lewis and Clark National Historic Park, places of significance, certainly the people of Oregon, but the people of the nation. You have proposed slashing $900 million from the national park system by offloading some of those 370 national park sites and that are not part of the crown jewels. And you calculated you could save this $900 million with lower maintenance because there'd be fewer sites. Do you have the list of sites that you plan to offload for us?
I do not. This is a proposed idea, and the whole 900 is not related specifically, but thank you for clarifying for everyone that this does not touch any of, as you've described, the crown jewel parks. But certainly in places like North Dakota with Knife River Indian Villages, we've got places that were designated as federal locations that have almost no visitors. They're cost centers. We have to staff them. We have to maintain them. And I know as a governor that...
So are you going to send us a list of the proposed sites?
This is a proposal for the 2026 budget, so we'll be working through, and I think this is going to be a case by case, state by state, to see where there. But yes, we will send you it when we have the plan.
I'll try to keep moving quickly because of the limited time, but certainly most of these, there are a small number that were not established through law, but almost all of the 370 were established by law. Is it your understanding that we would have to change the law in order for you to be able to put these sites up for transfer?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate that because we were very concerned that this would be a form of an executive action and then we'd all go to court and fight it out because the law established them, and we believe that the law has to be changed in order to send them off. And if you have some in your home state that you're comfortable sending off, that you could request the governors to say what do they want to do. But I have a feeling the governor of Oregon would say these sites, these 3 sites in Oregon and others are of great value to our national system for all Americans. I want to turn to the challenge we're getting of getting answers from your department. We've had repeated requests dating back to January 23rd about funding, whether you want to use the term frozen or the term impounded or delayed, and we haven't gotten answers. How do we get answers from your staff?
Well, let's start with any specific ones you may not have. I mean, we are following the executive orders, the secretarial orders to review. There was an enormous amount of money that went out the door between November 6th and January 20th. I think everyone would say that it would be responsible for us to make sure that those were going to the recipients that it was intended.
Well, just getting any kind of an answer would at least have us know that your team is actually paying attention to our requests for information. Can I call you when we can't get information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Our international partners are fighting poaching and trafficking of elephants and rhinos, haven't been able to access their legally obligated funds since January 20th. Are these funds blocked? Are they delayed? Are they frozen? That's an example. You may not have the answer, but it's affecting studies that have been in motion, that many Americans passionately support our effort to be part of the international effort for these amazing animals.
And was there, I'm sorry, the question was?
Yes, the question is, if you do know the answer, you can tell me now, but otherwise, can you commit to getting us an answer?
Yeah, we can commit to getting you an answer.
Thank you. The law requires that we get a list for the Great American Outdoors Act and the Land and Water Conservation Fund projects by April 29th. Obviously, we're past that. We have not gotten that list. Can you assure us we'll get it shortly?
Yes, we'll be working on that.
Working on it, like, can we get it within the next couple weeks?
We've got lots of irons in the fire in terms of right now as we're trying to build up staff, but yes, we'll be working on it.
Well, let me just note that the number of days left in fiscal year 25 are evaporating. So less and less time to actually have the funding that was passed by law transmitted in an effective way. We hope that when we see those lists, that the funds will get out by the end of the fiscal year and that they will be fairly distributed across the country. What many are concerned about is we will see funding from the Great American Outdoors Act turn into a political tool. Can you commit that that will not happen?
We will follow the law related to the Great American Outdoor Act.
Well, it is not an answer because the law gives you some flexibility. I'm asking that this not become a fund to reward blue or red house districts in a discriminatory fashion.
I'm smiling because that practice was so widely used by the prior administration. It's one of the things we're reviewing, but certainly we will be trying to allocate the dollars based on the merit and based on following the law within.
Actually, I think your statement is very inaccurate about the previous administration, but we'll leave it to others to determine that situation. Because my time's evaporated, we'll turn to our next person.
Thank you. Senator Hoeven.
I just want to say on the last thing, grants went up by over 100% in the last part of the last administration. If we cut them by 50%, we would be back to where the level of spending we were in 2001 at the beginning of the Biden administration. And so the idea that taking a look at any cut is some dangerous, destabilizing thing is just not true. This thing operated, all these agencies operated with far less levels of spending for decades and decades compared to where they've been at the last few years.
Madam Chair, let me just point out that is not a point that I made, so I don't appreciate you trying to pretend that I did.
Let's go to Senator Hoeven, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate it. Appreciate your service. Have you ever started any businesses and run any businesses?
Yes.
Have you served as a governor and at any point in your career?
Yes.
In any of those positions, did you go in and work to find savings and also then put people and systems in place that actually, while saving money, enabled you to provide better services to your customers?
Yes, thank you, Senator Hoeven. When I came into North Dakota, we had a $6 billion general fund, and we cut it by $1.7 billion, 27% the first 4 months I was in office. All the trains still ran on time, and we created more meaningful, more purposeful jobs for the people that work there.
In fact, not only do you have a great love of the outdoors, you're a rancher, you like to hunt, but one of your specialties is finding and putting in place systems that actually improve the productivity of the workforce so you deliver better service at lower cost. That's one of the things you specialize in, isn't it?
Well, I spent 2.5 decades in the private sector developing software systems to do exactly that.
Yeah, and so the other thing that would actually help you accomplish that and make sure there's more people in the parks and that the American citizens are better served is if you could actually get your management team in place, right, instead of having it held up for no good reason. So you just said, what, you've got 1 of 16 people that have to be confirmed, and we sit here voting in the middle of the night because nobody will let you get your team on board so you can do the very things that some here want to criticize you for? Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, we have the first one starting next week.
Yeah,
the
so-
executive leadership team. So
Yeah, so if somebody really wanted to help you get your team in place and make sure that service is getting done, seems like they would want to help you get that team in place rather than hold it up. Wouldn't you think? Would that make sense to you?
yes,
Okay. Are you, I know you're aware of the Advanced Training Center that we have at Camp Grafton, which is our National Guard facility in North Dakota, and that you've worked with it. And you're probably aware that of the recent statistics of the 5,400, more than 5,400 law enforcement BIA law enforcement officers trained, 3,000 of them got training at that facility, and so it supports Artesia in terms of getting BIA law enforcement officers trained up and on the job, and we only have in the Northern Plains about 50% of those staff positions filled, meaning almost a 50% vacancy rate. So my question to you is, will you work with us? And we've got the senator here from New Mexico, so he knows Artesia, he knows this, how important this issue is, but particularly for the Northern Plains and folks that live up there and want to stay up there, we've got to enhance this training and expand the course offerings. Are you willing to work and in support of that?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The next question I have is, we have wild horses in the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. I've got a bill in with Senator Kane, bipartisan. He has some experience with the horses out, you know, on the East Coast and in the parks there. It would make sure that require maintenance of a genetically diverse herd, in no event less than 150 horses. Are you in support of that legislation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to me about the public lands rule. Under the Biden administration, they sought to essentially put more than 245 million acres off limits of public land, off limits for any kind of energy development. For example, just an example, our state, that's 45% of the federal oil and gas acreage, and that's 99% of the federal coal acreage. That's just our state, okay? So talk to me about the importance of addressing that rule, overhauling that rule, and making sure that we have access on behalf of, you know, you talk, and you can talk about the balance sheet here a little bit if you want in terms of our federal assets for energy production on behalf of this country and you know, one of your key roles in terms of energy development.
Well, yes, Senator Hoeven, striking hundreds of millions of acres off of the America's balance sheet was basically like stealing from our children and our children's children, because all of those represent the opportunity to sustainably develop, whether it's grazing, whether it's forestry, whether it's critical minerals, which are essential for national security, whether it's just energy development to help win the AI arms race with China. All of those things are essential, and public lands were meant for the benefit and the use of the American people. They weren't meant to be certainly some areas are wilderness areas and need to be protected completely, like national parks and wilderness areas, but that represents a small fraction of the total amount. So I'm with you completely, and it's completely irresponsible that we would cheer when we're hurting ourselves financially, because when we shut down the multiple use doctrine for public lands, we're actually hurting America and we're helping our adversaries.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, just a final question quickly, but it's just to once again reaffirm, your whole career, in every capacity you've had, has been to provide better service to the people that you're working for, whether it's in a business or whether it's for the state. And given the opportunity, you believe you can do that here as well. In other words, better service in the national parks, better resource management, if you're given the chance to do it, right?
Yeah, I've never entered an organization that has this much redundant overhead and outdated systems. Never seen anything like it. It's worse than when I walked in North Dakota 9 years ago. And the opportunities for creating better, more meaningful jobs for our dedicated team members and to deliver better service is enormous.
And I've known you for over 30 years, and you've done it in every role, and I would just encourage people to work with you, and they will be very pleased, I believe, with the outcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Hoeven. Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Chairman Murkowski. Mr. Secretary, I wanted to start by touching briefly on Hurricane Ridge. That is a place, as you know, is very special to people in my home state of Washington, and visitors come to it from all over the world. I know that you visited Olympic National Park last week, and you saw how scenic it was and a hint of how brutal the weather can be. It's called Hurricane Ridge for a reason. The Hurricane Ridge Day Lodge burned down in a tragic fire 2 years ago, and Congress delivered the emergency funding necessary to rebuild it last year. In the execution report that you delivered to the committee in February, the disaster funding spend plan, you included the money for the Olympic National Park, I understand is for Hurricane Ridge. Do you have any updates for us on the next steps for that project?
No, but I did have an opportunity with the park superintendent and some of the lead people to actually get to Hurricane Ridge, and thankfully there was not 70-mile-an-hour winds. It was beautiful, sunny, calm, gorgeous, but I got to see the site where the fire had happened and was able to meet with them regarding the plans that they have, and it looks like a great project.
Good. And can you just keep my staff and me updated on that project as it moves forward? It's really important to all of us.
Okay, thank you.
As you saw, Washington State is home to a number of pristine public lands. People travel from all over the world to experience my state and Oregon. Secretary Burgum, our public lands aren't for sale. Protecting our wilderness, living up to our tribal obligations, keeping our communities safe, it's just not negotiable. And it's actually a core reason that your department does exist and have been these have been places with strong bipartisan support. So I'm really concerned that one of the first things you did was make deep, painful cuts at our parks and start talking about our public lands kind of like they're a piggy bank. I do not want to tell future generations that, see that river of sludge used to be clear, used to have salmon, or see that charred mountainside used to be a forest with campgrounds and trails, or that smokestack used to be a national park. I worry because it feels to me like your vision could lead to that with your budget cuts and mass firings and reorganization. And I'm deeply concerned about the proposed cuts to programs and funding that our tribes rely on, the mass firing of park rangers. They're the people who help our visitors. They clear the trails, they clean the bathrooms, they respond to emergencies, and it just, as I watch this and hear from folks and see what's happening, on top of getting some bedrock environmental protections, I just don't see how your department can execute the law without staff in place. So just let me ask you, in your short tenure, you have overseen significant staffing reductions, over 10%, and reorganization efforts across the Department of Interior, with, I understand, more firings to come. The National Park Service has lost 18% of its staff. You managed to actually fire the only plumber at Mount Rainier National Park. There's just nothing efficient about that kind of management. You've also decided that what few staff remain at our national parks will focus solely on visitor services. That really abandons the conservation mission, which no doubt will lead to the degradation of our natural resources and our parks. Actually, on May 8th, 5 former NPS directors, Republican and Democratic administration alike, raised really grave concerns about these decisions. And they wrote that the National Park Service's founding statute requires conservation at our parks, so they will, quote, be unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. You know, we need trail guides and biologists. We need EMTs and geologists. We need snowplow drivers, and we need historians. Mr. Secretary, do you acknowledge that you do have a statutory obligation to conserve our national parks? And that's really a simple yes or no.
Yes.
Well, it just feels to me watching this that you are abandoning that obligation with the staffing cuts, and your job is to carry out the laws that Congress has passed, not as you wish were written. So let me ask you, how many people do you plan to fire from the National Park Service?
Let me respond by saying, I'm going to repeat myself, that there's an opportunity to have more people working in our parks in all the positions that you've described, Senator, and have less people working for the National Park Service. We just have to accept that this math, that if you've got a situation where less than that slightly less than 50% of the people actually work in the park, that everything you said, I can increase the number of people in the park, but still decrease the number of people on payroll at the National Park Service because we're eliminating overhead, back office, IT, and HR roles. And so I can agree with everything that you're saying, but then to have a mischaracterization that if we cut anybody, that somehow I'm cutting into the conservation mission.
It's huge cuts, and the people you're talking about are actually the support staff. And when you cut support staff, that's not efficient. You know, how does someone drive a snowplow if you don't have a staffer that makes sure that the government gets the best deal to buy that snowplow? I mean, there's many, many detailed people that you're talking about that actually make sure that the spending is efficient, that the people are efficient, that the we all know how important staff is. I mean, you can't survive without that. Those are the people that you're letting go. We can't be efficient if they are not there.
Well, are you suggesting that the National Park Service today is operating at peak efficiency and that there isn't any changes that I could make?
I would suggest that I welcome any suggestions to us about how to be efficient, but just mass across-the-board cuts and firing is really going to not increase efficiency at our parks, and that I think we all should be very concerned about.
But if the goal is for us to have more people working in the parks, you're comfortable if I can get to a spot where we have more people working in the parks?
You show me what employees you are leaving behind that don't support someone that makes sure that they have the equipment that they need, that is up to date, it's running, those kinds of things. You can't just cut those people and expect people to be out in the national parks without somebody who's making sure that their equipment is safe, that their hours are maintained, all the things that it takes to run a place. Our national parks are huge. They take a lot of people to run.
A state is huge. I've run in DOT. I understand the role of support personnel across Fish and Wildlife, Parks and Rec, DOT. All of these aspects of a national park are part of running a state. And I'm confident that with our team that we can achieve your objectives and still have a reduction.
One thing I am really concerned about, and everybody should be, is our national wildland firefighting efforts. And countless staff who provide the necessary support there. For example, firefighters put their lives at risk. Without support they need in many different roles, it just gets more dangerous. So those are the kinds of people that I am extremely concerned about, that without thought or really smart moves, that we're going to be putting our parks at risk.
Well, agree on the wildland firefighters. That's why Secretary Rollins and I yesterday held a joint event reaffirming our commitment to work together between the Forest Service and Interior, and our commitment to have full staffing for wildland firefighters this summer. And we're close to approaching that goal. And so we're fully committed. And
okay, I appreciate it. Just one really quick question regarding our tribes. You have a role in fulfilling the federal government's trust and treaty responsibilities to our tribes. I see numerous cuts across the budget that defends tribal police, putting together the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I just wanted to ask you, how many tribes have you personally consulted with on your budget request?
I've been meeting with tribes every week since I've been here. I've got a deep understanding of our challenges and shortage in law enforcement.
There's 574 tribes. Which ones have you met with? Have you consulted or met with?
I can happy to provide you a list, but I just recently had the Interior Secretary Tribal Advisory Committee. We had 24 representatives from tribes from across the country actually meeting in my office just a couple of weeks ago. Law enforcement was a key part of that. We had an opportunity to meet with the family of Emily Pike. I brought Kash Patel over. Of course, it's not just the BIA, it's also the FBI. When these cases get escalated, we have over 6,000.
I would just remind all of us that Kash Patel is cutting $500 million from his budget on this.
And he's providing 60 people to Indian country right now to help with the 6,000 unsolved cases on the missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is a priority for us.
All of us. And I just want to say that my tribes in Washington State are deeply concerned. They're telling us that these layoffs will eliminate natural resource management, basic social services, and they are horrified. So I hope that in your list that you will provide me that I see some of their names.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Murray. We'll turn to Senator Rounds. And, Mr. Secretary, just so you know, our votes have started, so you're going to see us popping in and out here. Don't take that as
Chairman.
lack of interest.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Burgum. I want to follow up a little bit on the Native American tribes as well. And I just, First of all, I've appreciated the working relationship that you've had with the tribes in the North and South Dakota region. And one area in particular that they have expressed concern, and you've heard about it before, and that is that most Great Plains tribal law enforcement agencies are understaffed, and with as few as 2 officers responsible for patrolling millions of acres during a single shift. They've come up with a recommendation. They'd like to be able to hire more law enforcement officers, but part of the challenge is that in order to get them set up, they've literally got to travel to New Mexico to get trained. And tribal law enforcement leaders often point to that as being one reason why there's a shortage, because most of these young people coming into that profession don't want to go that far away for 6 months at a time. So one of the suggestions is could we also put in or work with, they have the option of doing work with local law enforcement as well and being trained, such as the South Dakota Law Enforcement Training Center and so forth. But we'd like to have more room for them, perhaps locally. And they may have talked to you about this already, but would you consider working with them in a cooperative effort to perhaps find a way to fund some additional spots in the Northern Great Plains for those law enforcement officers so they wouldn't have to travel for 6 months down to New Mexico?
Yeah, this is an idea I know that you and Senator Hoeven and others have worked on. We've had great collaboration on advanced training at the Camp Grafton in North Dakota. Adding basic training there, I think, would be helpful for recruiting for Northern Plains tribes and would be fully supportive of that.
And I think it would save some money as well, just in terms of travel costs. Let me also just suggest the relationship with our tribal leaders is critical, and they really appreciate the consultation that, and sometimes it's lacking. And we'd like to rebuild that again. Over the last several years, some Great Plains tribes have experienced violent crime rates of up to 5 times higher than the national average. Tribal leaders have indicated that despite their efforts, these rates remain alarmingly high. Several have proposed establishing a cross-jurisdictional commission to directly address violent crime. This proposed body could include relevant officials from the Department of the Interior and the Department of Justice. So not just such as you and another secretary, but to have a built-in program where your folks could meet with their folks on a regular basis. As the tribal nations continue to deal with threats of public safety, would you consider working with the tribal leaders on this initiative?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it would really add a lot, and I think we'd get a lot of stuff done in a short period of time with that type of a joint commission type approach. Thank you. And then finally, I want to hit an item with regard to minor fence line disputes. We just went through this with the Department of Agriculture and the Forest Service. So the Department of the Interior land management agencies oversee hundreds of millions of acres of land throughout the United States. Laws such as the Federal Land Policy and Management Act authorize a multiple-use approach for public lands, allowing producers to utilize federal grazing leases. Concerned landowners in western South Dakota have approached my office regarding minor fence line disputes between producers and federal officials, specifically after we had that type of a situation come up with the Department of Ag or the Department of Forestry. My understanding is that such disagreements are relatively common in areas with a high concentration of federal land. And just curious, do agencies within the Department of the Interior follow a standard mediation process for resolving these issues, or is this something that we need to look at?
I'm not aware, but I'd be happy to look at it. I'm familiar, we've got lots of U.S. grasslands from the U.S. Forest Service in western North Dakota. I own ranch land there, and I know that when you've got topography in the Badlands, that sometimes the fence line, it's impossible to put the fence line on the property line. And so, having these be mediated locally versus escalating into legal action would just be common sense.
And I think that's the approach we'd like to take. These farmers and ranchers have been on that for years. It's been back and forth, and most recently with the ability to do fence lines more accurately. Now we're finding pros and cons in terms of acres that may be on one side of a fence or on the other side of the fence either way. And rather than ending up in court, it seems to me that a mediation process would be a lot better way to approach these. And I would just appreciate your assistance if we can put that together for the Department of the Interior if it does not already exist.
That'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Van Hollen, you're next.
Thank you, Senator. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. I do want to associate myself with the comments that Senator Merkley and Murray have made, expressing concerns about the budget or the lack of budget to date when it comes to the spend plan for fiscal year 25. You and I have never met. You come from the beautiful state, North Dakota. I want to tell you a little bit about my state of Maryland and the very important role the Department of Interior plays in the state of Maryland, and seek your assurances on a couple things. So one of the world's natural treasures and one of our country's national treasures is the Chesapeake Bay. And we need to make sure we preserve the bay and maintain a healthy bay, not just because it's a natural wonder, but because big parts of the Maryland economy depend on a healthy bay. We have the watermen who make their livelihood off the bounty of the bay. We have a tourism industry that depends on a healthy bay, sports fishermen, as well as the boating industry, and a whole economic ecosystem around a healthy bay. And so the challenge, of course, is how to protect it, right? Because the bay watershed encompasses 6 states and the District of Columbia. You can put something in a stream in parts of New York State, and they end up in the Chesapeake Bay. It has a 14-to-1 land-to-water ratio, which is the largest such ratio of any coastal water body in the world. So you can see that what happens on the land has a direct impact on the health of the Chesapeake Bay. And the Department of Interior has a number of very important programs in place to help protect the bay, its health, and the economy, the health of the economy. One is the Wilds Grant program. This is a program that has been bipartisan in origin. Senator Shelley Moore Capito and I launched it. It helps restore and protect fish and wildlife habitat from brook trout in West Virginia to ruffed grouse in Pennsylvania forests to oysters in the Chesapeake Bay. Another very important DOI program is the U.S. Geological Survey. It provides very important science that all of the states use to help develop their strategies to protect the health of the bay and guide the restoration efforts. We also have in Maryland a number of national wildlife refuges, 7 altogether, that, number one, help provide critical habitat around the bay and prevent more pollution from running off the land into the bay. They also help provide outdoor opportunities for people who visit the state of Maryland and the bay. And then there's the National Park Service, which through the Chesapeake Gateways Partnership provides more public access to the bay. And then we have a number of important national heritage areas and the National Park Service that plays a very important role in our state, including Antietam National Battlefield, including the Harriet Tubman National Underground Railroad Historic Park, including Fort McHenry National Monument and Historic Shrine. So that's a quick overview of all of the important interaction investments the Department of Interior has with the state of Maryland. And so my question to you, Mr. Secretary, is will you work with me, the committee, the Maryland delegation to, number one, maintain that strong partnership, but also to maintain the resources that are necessary to support that partnership?
Yes, absolutely, Senator.
I appreciate that. And the reason I ask is, as we look at the skinny budget, a number of the categories that are deeply cut would impact almost all of the programs that I just mentioned, right? I mentioned the WILD program, for example. If you look at the category of funding and the cuts there, they're very significant. If you look at the National Geological Survey cuts that are being proposed, it appears, although it's hard to determine, that the entire program that supports that scientific work might be wiped out. I don't know for sure, but this is why we're expressing so many concerns, because this partnership has been very important to our state of Maryland, to the Chesapeake Bay. And so I appreciate, Mr. Secretary, your assurances, both in terms of working together and the resources to match that effort, and I look forward to continuing our conversation.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here. I'm the last one up here, so we're going to take some time and answer questions to give people their opportunity to come back. I wanted to point out, has the duties for the Interior increased by 50% over the last 4 years?
They have not.
If I'm not mistaken here, your budget from 2021 to 2024 grew by almost 50%.
That is correct.
So there's probably a lot of room to make changes, right?
Yes, and I think there's ways to make changes where we don't touch programs, but we actually just focus on reducing overhead, because the overhead burden across the department and the Bureau is staggering.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. What's your envision of seeing Interior? I mean, because we have a wealth of resources, right in front of us, underneath our feet. We're heavily dependent on even, I would consider, adversaries like China for rare earth minerals. And yet we find that throughout public lands all over the place. We find that we have an opportunity that we could even use resources, not just allow us to be less dependent or completely independent of other countries, but where we could also use it to pay down a significant amount of debt. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's true. And you mentioned critical minerals. I mean, I think this is something that may have not broken through to the public because there's been a lot going on the last month, but on April 4th, China put on export controls relative to critical minerals. These are things that are essential for American automobiles, for American technology, for American defense. And we have literally, because they control 85% of the refining and we do not have strategic minerals reserves like we have a strategic petroleum reserve, we were literally within 1 month in this country facing the possibility that we're going to run out of minerals, which could have led to shutdowns of factory in the U.S. And I think the general public does not realize the precarious situation we're in. So part of the task that we have is to make sure that we are, for national security purposes and for economic purposes, that we're not put in that position of vulnerability. And it's one of the things that we're working on across the whole of government. But as you're absolutely right, Senator, that those critical minerals, many exist, in public lands, but we've killed mining in this country the same way we've killed timber harvesting, the way we've attacked ranching and farming, and certainly the way we've attacked energy development. And
It's become quite a national security risk.
yeah, it's huge. It's one of our largest national security risks is the fact that we're in a great power battle with a country that controls the supply chains for what we need to actually build our defense.
What's the biggest barrier for us to be able to actually retrieve those rare earth minerals?
Well, I think that this has been a long-term strategy on behalf of China where they have not just cornered markets, but when U.S. Companies, innovators, entrepreneurs, job creators have said, hey, I'm going to open up a mine, we bury those companies with red tape. Those few that have persevered and become successful.
We as the United States.
We, the United States, have done that through layers and layers of, permitting delays, passing, laws that create extra costs, that discourage them of being able to get the capital they need to develop those kinds of either extraction or refining processes. And then when they finally do, a few of them break through and get successful, and then they're producing a mineral here, then China just dumps and floods the market with the supply that they have, collapsing the price, and then the companies can't exist. And so they're using their power and state capitalism to actually affect the outcome of companies here. And so between our red tape and their dumping materials, we literally have no critical minerals industry left, and we've got to get back in that game. I mean, it's just incredible the risk we put ourselves in.
And I know you're working with the Department of Energy and plus the President on correcting this, because as I can't overstate, it is a huge national security risk we run, and we literally have it under our feet. And a lot of this is found in tribal land. And tribes that are in reservations that are struggling today, struggling financially. You go some of these reservations and they literally look like a third world country. They don't have the ability to bring gaming in because they're in very rural areas. Their hospitals are in bad shape, and their schools are in bad shape. There's almost no future for those that live there, and yet we could bring that future and that wealth to those tribes if we could get out of our way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been in discussion with one of the tribes in Arizona. I mean, they've got tremendous uranium deposits, and here we are. I mean, even though the war in Ukraine has been going on, we're importing enriched uranium from Russia to run our 93 remaining nuclear plants. I mean, some of these things are just absurd, that we've created dependencies around the world on the adversaries that we're actually in, if not in power battles with or trade battles, we're in proxy wars with them, and it's just insane that we would be dependent on them for our, in this case, almost 20% of our electricity in this country.
Right. I want to turn my attention to McGirt, a decision that was made by the Supreme Court that's really put law enforcement and law and order at a heavy strain, and it's unique to Oklahoma. We're doing better with it, but I've asked the justice to come in and just brief Oklahoma to kind of see what his envision was. Unfortunately, I met a less than welcome response from the justice, and I'm trying to leave his name out of it because I don't want to bring attention to it. But it's caused a lot of problems. We are greatly under-resourced. I would compare some areas to literally the Wild West. We have law enforcement that can't pull over individuals with tribal tags. We have tribes that are suing, that are literally suing the municipalities to which they govern in, and we could use some help. There's not enough FBI agents to be able to prosecute. As I met with the FBI in the region, they said they don't have time to deal with the most heinous crimes. Heinous. And sir, I know you've been in the same briefings that I've been in, and those heinous crimes are heinous, but there's a lot of crimes behind that are pretty heinous too. And we just could use a lot of assistance in that. And so I would look forward to working with you, and even if you have time for us to be able to come in and brief you on it, or get you to Oklahoma at some point and really do a deep dive, because it has become quite a mess.
I would welcome the opportunity to get a deeper briefing on sort of how McGirt is playing out, but I do understand that this is one of the most, tribal law enforcement is challenging anyway when you've got states, counties, tribes, overlapping jurisdictions, lack of MOUs, lack of, agreements around pursuit and chase. I mean, there's all kinds of challenges that I'm familiar with, but the McGirt thing is takes it to a whole nother level.
Yes.
And it's literally the most complex law enforcement environment, and that's the kind of environment that law enforcement personnel themselves are saying, hey, I can't do this. If I can't figure out, when I see an action happening, but I can't do something about it, and I'm in law enforcement because I may not have the jurisdiction.
Right.
That is, We've created a super complex situation, and I appreciate you, Senator, being so engaged with it, because it's going to take a full effort to try to get this sorted out.
Thank you so much. I've stalled long enough. I'll yield back.
I appreciate the tap dancing. Thank you, Senator Mullen. Let's go to Senator Heinrich.
Just in time. Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary, I appreciate our conversations, your responsiveness. I want to bring up what is in the skinny budget, and just quote from it real quick. The National Park Service responsibilities include a large number of sites that are not quote-unquote national parks in the traditionally understood sense, many of which receive small numbers of mostly local visitors and are better categorized and managed as state-level parks. I want to strike a note of caution with that sort of approach. I love our Big P national parks. Behind me is a picture of a non-Big P national park. It is a national preserve. It is the Valles Caldera National Preserve. We've been talking in New Mexico for 100 years about this being a national park, and we finally settled on the approach of a preserve, in part because we wanted the natural resource management of a national park with the ability to also have world-class hunting and fishing and the visitors that come with all of those things. So I would just urge you to look as you develop this list, and many of these units have been created in statute. many of them that are not necessarily a Big P National Park, are incredibly important parts of our national park system, our history, and our culture. And I just hope you will approach that with caution.
Absolutely. And with consultation. So, but and thanks for bringing the beautiful photo behind you.
Yeah, if you get a chance to visit, I highly recommend it, and bring your fly rod.
Is that you in the photo?
Actually, it is. Yep.
I thought it might be. Tell by the angle of the wrist.
Have you discussed with any particular states this approach yet, or is it still in the sort of formational
This is completely in the idea formation stage.
Okay. BIE school construction costs. I'm not going to question your effectiveness at finding ways to reduce overhead and push forward on the ground deployment for better resource management. But this particular account, and I was talking to the chair about this on the way over, really concerns me. The president's budget calls for a 79% or $187 million reduction in the BIA school construction account. This is a place where we have a $4 billion construction backlog. It's not overhead. I mean, this is money to actually build schools. It's not money to pay administrators. And so you and I have talked about the incredibly poor condition of some of these BIE schools. How are you going to move the needle on BIE school construction with this budget line item?
It's interesting that we've got in BIE about 125,000 kids, which is about exactly what we had in North Dakota in our K-12 system. But of course, these are spread across the nation. Not every state has got a BIE school. And we've got a complicated situation that some places you've got a BIE school next to a tribal school, next to a public school. That's a scenario I've seen. And I think that part of this is we've got to take a look at the sort of the system-wide. In terms of dollars in states like my own state of North Dakota, we put more dollars into BIE than we do into tribal and into public, and yet the outcomes are the worst. So there's not I'm not, when I'm education hat, I'm not seeing a correlation. I think the school construction and deferred maintenance, I mean, that's an issue across parks, across refuges. I mean, it's across all of government, federal government. We got a deferred maintenance issue. So the construction thing I just set aside, but I think, where I would start my focus on BIE is, how do we improve outcomes for those kids? And then are there opportunities for us from a school construction standpoint to look for any opportunities with tribes or with public schools to not, to, if we fix the problems, but can we do it? I mean, I know there's a case in our state where they're less than a mile apart.
I think we can both agree we've got to do better for these kids.
Yes.
The president's budget proposes a almost $200 million cut to the Bureau of Land Management Conservation Programs. In your confirmation hearing, you told me that you would not make any wholesale changes to monument designations in New Mexico without first meeting with local elected leaders and citizen groups in the state. Do I still have your commitment on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Appreciate that.
I think you do. I think you do know there have been concerns. People have come to me about the buffer zone related to that and how it infringes on tribal allottee rights. So we're listening to all sides of this thing, but we'll keep in close consultation.
That I think you're talking about a particular mineral withdrawal, and my question was related directly to the monuments.
Yes.
Which is a separate issue, but
Yes.
I'll be happy to engage with you on both.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Henry. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Burgum, I am proud to represent a state with two national scenic trails, the North Country and the Ice Age. And I've been hearing from Wisconsinites about some of the workforce cuts and frozen funds under this administration. They've really left the trails critically understaffed and underfunded. And so I would like to ask for you to provide an update on the current funding for maintenance and staffing, particularly for the Ice Age Trail in Wisconsin. I don't know if you're prepared to do that today. If not, I would ask that you do that within the next couple of days.
No, I'm not prepared to do it right now, but happy to have my team take a look at the trail.
Okay. And the staffing and the maintenance funds. We've had a lot of discussion. My colleagues have asked a lot of questions about the way in which some of the staffing cuts have been handled, even before your confirmation, and the frozen funds. I know this is a hearing to look at the 2026 fiscal year, but I do want to call your attention to some of the impacts that we're seeing. Under your leadership at the Department of Interior, staff have been fired and funds in some cases have been clawed back that were supporting research into foundational science for freshwater ecosystem health and fisheries, wildlife disease prevention, and agriculture and economic sustainability. While the president asserts that his administration, he distanced himself from Project 2025, as you are well familiar. Nonetheless, it's following through with the playbook's vision by attempting to abolish the Biological Resources Division of the United States Geological Survey. So can you share with me the mission of the Biological Resources Division?
Well, I think I'll just talk in general about the evolution of USGS over time, because this was.
Well, I'm particularly interested in this division.
Yes, well, this division was one that was not part of the original scope of USGS. It was added, and the look that we're taking on this thing is because one of the original scopes was actually mapping, and it seems that there's a number of things that, as you referred to in biological, that might be better suited to be in U.S. Fish and Wildlife versus in USGS.
Okay, well, I want to share some of the concerns I've been hearing regularly about the biological services funding and staffing cuts. Roughly 100 people are or were employed in Madison and 80 more at a location in La Crosse, Wisconsin, until they began to be fired in March. In La Crosse, these scientists have dedicated their professional lives to studying and tracking invasive carp, which decimate ecosystems and commercial fishing operations. They've been focused on restoring habitats along the Mississippi River, which improves surface water quality for farms and navigation for the shipping industry. They're studying PFAS to understand the impacts of those chemicals on wildlife. In the USGS National Wildlife Health Center in Madison, it is, by the way, the only center dedicated to wildlife disease detection, control, and prevention in the United States. And in Madison, they've been making progress on monitoring the avian flu pandemic through their work at the Wildlife Health Center. So I would like your commitment to reverse the budget's intent to abolish the Biological Resources and division, and instead we need to really invest in our nation's ability to respond to threats to our natural resources and wildlife health by funding these centers and their staffs in Wisconsin. Can I have your commitment on that?
I will not provide that commitment right now. I mean, obviously, these are important priorities. We have important priorities everywhere, but of course, one of the things that we also think is an important priority is we, as a nation, when we have a $1 trillion interest cost, and we spent last year $2,000 billion more than we brought in. I think that every department in this administration feels the responsibility to try to find a way that, even though the work is important, how do we prioritize to spend less money to help bring our overall budget in balance?
I think you would find the economic impacts of funding these missions are enormous. On the invasive carp, for example, were they to ever get into the Great Lakes system, the ecological damage is almost unimaginable. I want to, actually, I notice I've run out of time. I do have some questions that I'll submit for the record relating to the rights protection implementation line in the Interior and Environment appropriation bills that helps fulfill the federal treaty, trust, and contract obligations to tribes. And I do have some specific questions that I will submit for the record. I hope you'll get back to me quickly.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, welcome. How are you?
I'm great.
Mr. Secretary, you familiar with the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge in Georgia?
I'm not familiar, no.
I'd love to get you down to visit. Can you do that?
I would love to get to Georgia.
We would love to welcome you to visit the Okefenokee. It is one of our state's great treasures, one of the most beautiful, biodiverse wildlife refuges in North America, the largest blackwater swamp of its kind in North America. There is an effort with bipartisan support that the previous administration supported to secure UNESCO World Heritage Site designation for the Okefenokee. This has strong bipartisan support among local officials, state officials in Georgia, former Governor Sonny Perdue, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones among them. Will you continue to support our efforts to secure UNESCO World Heritage Site designation for the Okefenokee, which is now in your purview as part of a National Wildlife Refuge system?
Well, I'm certainly interested in learning more about it. I know that that's a lengthy process and is of achieving that. So I would love to understand all the implications of supporting it, and if there's budget implications for Interior. So, but I'd certainly be happy to take a look at it.
Well, we need your support. We need to get you down there as well to spend some time at the refuge. I know there's been some public discussion about sale of public lands. Can you give an unequivocal guarantee that you will not pursue any sale of any part of the Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge?
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Secretary, I wrote you a letter on April 10th about an apparent effort by DOJ to close the U.S. Geological Survey office in Norcross, Georgia. This is the Water Science Center in Norcross. Plays a critical role in ensuring water quality for folks in Metro Atlanta. Did you receive that letter?
I'm certain that our team did.
I have not received a response. It's been about 6 weeks. Any reason for that?
No specific reason other than how incredibly short-staffed we are as we're trying to ramp up.
Can you get back more promptly in the future?
As we just said earlier, when we have 0 of our 16 Senate confirmed leaders on board. First one is coming on the Tuesday after Memorial Day, and so as we get leadership team in place, I'm sure our operations will speed up.
We need timely responses to those kinds of inquiries, Mr. Secretary. I mean, the staff at this office test water quality to ensure that Georgians don't drink contaminated water. Senator Warnock and I have asked you not to close this office. No justification for such closure was offered. There's significant public concern in Georgia about the potential impact on water quality. Am I correct that you've abandoned those plans or overruled the DOJ effort to close that office in Norcross?
I'm not familiar with the, when you're saying closure, I know that there was an effort to take a look at all the real estate we had, particularly the fact that we had virtually every employee in Interior was working remotely, and yet we were paying hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate bills. And so I think it was reasonable that we took a look to say, do we need the real estate? But I'm not sure when you're saying closing the office, if you're talking about the positions or about the office lease. Because I know some office leases were being considered removed and some have been.
Yeah, so DOJ expressed its intent to close the U.S. Geological Survey Water Science Center in Norcross, Georgia. You've heard from me and Senator Warnock our opposition. As I mentioned, there's tremendous public concern. Are you still planning to close that office?
Well, we'll certainly take this particular request under consultation, and our team will be in discussion with you and your team about that.
Okay, well, with respect, Mr. Secretary, this is an issue that I raised about a month and a half ago with you.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, so when can I expect a response?
Soon.
Okay. Let me raise with you the ongoing bipartisan effort to establish Georgia's first ever national park. This is the Ocmulgee National Park and Preserve Initiative. Congressman Austin Scott, Republican in the House, and I are leading a bipartisan bicameral group of the Georgia delegation in order to establish Fish National Park and Preserve. For the first time, made major progress in the U.S. Senate last Congress on this effort. Overwhelming local support in the Macon area for getting this done. We've been grateful for the department's past support, providing technical assistance to help us move that forward. Will you continue to provide that support?
We're happy to engage with you and take a look at this proposal and this project.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, and my time has expired. I know you're getting up to speed and staffing up. Would appreciate more intensity of engagement on some of these Georgia concerns and look forward to sitting down with you and welcoming you to the state to work with you in Georgia's interest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ossoff. Well, as you can tell, Mr. Secretary, everyone wants a piece of what goes on in the department because the role and the responsibilities there are very, very key. We're going to have an opportunity for a second round here, and rather than going into some of the particulars and the details, I'm probably going to stick to more generic, but you and I have had a conversation about really understanding and being able to value the assets that we have when it comes to our public lands. As I'm looking at the skinny budget and I look at USGS and see close to a 40% reduction from current levels, 38.9, I worry about things like what happens with mapping, USGS's Earth MRI, the 3-depth programs, just to understand where our mineral reserves are. So I'm hoping that as you're going forward, you're looking at the level of cuts, and you're looking outward to say, all right, what is it? Where are we going to create additional value when we have better understanding? And I think we would both agree that being able to identify that is going to be really critical for the mission going forward. So I don't necessarily need your comment to that other than you're nodding and you're giving me a yes there. So I'm good with that. I also understand from the discussion here today, a lot of interest with what may be forthcoming with regards to the Park Service and what it may mean for states to be managing some of these assets. I certainly have a lot of questions. I'm not quite sure which national parks are actually considered crown jewel parks. I know what I consider them to be. I just don't know if there's like a category that says crown jewel parks. And if so, if where Alaska's parks kind of stack up on this. So what I'm hearing from you is this is very much in the preliminary stages of discussion. As things advance, not only the chair and the ranking will be brought in, but the many of us who have questions in these areas will be read into more of the details.
Yes, and quick clarification, the national parks with a capital N, capital P, the 63 national parks, none of those are under consideration for transfer. That would include all the national parks in Alaska. Most of these are historic sites, cultural sites, that, as they said, that have got low visitation that's primarily local, that might better fit into a state historic society site or some other designation.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hear that on the Alaska side specifically, because as you know, many of these areas are so remote and so very difficult to access that if you're just using the metric of how many people have visited, you would say, all right, well, yeah, these come off the books, but that's not the case, and I appreciate that recognition. And we have received an official reprogramming request from the department to consolidate, to unify, to optimize a lot of the administrative functions. We're still trying to get additional details to make an informed decision on the reprogramming. So again, as I mentioned at the outset, just the opportunity for staffs to be able to sit down and go through that level of detail. I don't want to take your valuable time on a phone call. This is something that I think both of our teams could benefit from just a real considered analysis of that. I want to raise an issue that hasn't been raised here yet today, and this is that section of your portfolio that relates to insular affairs. I know that you've got perhaps a special and a personal interest in the region, given your father's history, but looking at the skinny budget, it really doesn't give any insight as to what may happen within the Office of Insular Affairs. I have had, over the years, built some good relationships with folks out there, and I hear their concerns. I met just recently with Congressman King Hines from the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, just talking about their just disastrous economic conditions out there. I was in Palau in October and talking to them about making sure that, again, when we have made commitments as a country for federal assistance under certain compacts, that we're there. So I don't know if you have any comments, if you have any updates in terms of persons that you've identified to head up the office. But I just want you to know that while we might not talk about it a lot at the committee, we do recognize that this is an aspect of Interior that oftentimes is kind of out of sight, out of mind, and we don't regard that as such.
It was maybe my first week or my second week after confirmation, we held a meeting that included all the governors and representatives from the countries and the islands that we were involved with in insular affairs. We also invited Puerto Rico to join that discussion. Several of those governors, including from Guam, I've had a relationship through Western Governors Association, and know some of them personally. We just in the last 2 weeks got a leader on board and an assistant. One of those are one of those folks on that team is from Marianas Islands. That's a first that we've had someone. So he's received some press locally back home and across that we've got local. But we also I was able to recruit a seasoned, longtime executive from the cellular industry who I've known personally for a long time, who helped bring cellular service to across all these islands. He, interestingly, when he came out of law school, he interviewed for in person for a judgeship, federal judgeship on Palau, and so he's familiar with islands economies, island infrastructure, and he's en route right now for his first trip. He started 2 weeks ago, got up to speed, and he's out visiting them, and I know that we're going to have a lot of intel coming back from that trip. This is all very tied into defense. One of the things, yes, we've got the economic issues, but China has been working in the oceans on 3 sides of American Samoa. Just this week, we announced for the first time that we are going to be offering a potential lease sale offshore in American Samoa for critical mineral development on the seafloor. These are, again, if we can bring economic activity back to support their economy, but also assert our rights relative to those being U.S. waters versus the activity that China. So I think we're going to be working very closely with the Department of Defense. Of course, Guam, as you know, has got a huge defense presence for us, but we've neglected some of these areas, both economically and strategically, and our intention is to make sure that they're all essential for both those reasons, both strategic and economic, and we have a responsibility, but we take it very seriously. I'm excited about the team we're putting in place.
I appreciate you sharing that. I will defer to my colleague now, Senator Merkley.
So here on the committee, when we put into law the strategy, we specify several things that are specific activities locked into law, but many others are in report language. And the report language is designed to give the administration flexibility. And that creates kind of a dialogue about the administration saying, well, we'd like to not do that and do a little more over here and so on and so forth. But it also means that there's a desire for Congress to have the thinking behind the report language honored and discussed. So a spending plan is due to us, and you all provided one. And a normal spending plan, and I'm just going to show the one for the Geological Service. This is 6 pages. And if you want to know what we're going to spend on harmful algae blooms, it's in here. If you want to know what we're going to do for Shake Alert, which is a tsunami warning system, very, very important to us on the West Coast, and so forth, it's all here. So the spending plan is very, very detailed, giving us information both on the things we put into law, but also on the plan as related to the things we put into report language. When we received your spending plan, and I'm just use Geological Service as an example, it has 3 lines. It has a total amount, which would be found in a normal 6-page spending plan, and 2 sub-accounts that constitute 12% of the spending for the department, which means 88% of this spending plan, we have no idea what you're going to do. Now, let me take Shake Alert as that example in Oregon. The effort has been extensive. We have earthquakes every year. Someday we'll have a massive one. We had a harbor virtually destroyed in southern Oregon, near the boundary of Oregon and California, from an earthquake that happened in Japan. Because of the formation of the underwater mountains, it channeled that energy right towards that spot across the entire Pacific Ocean. So you can imagine if there's a nearby earthquake or a really big one, we're in big trouble. So our work is kind of at a loss. And all these folks out there and all these individual programs that are in these 6 pages, they don't know if they're getting funding or not. And yet, we're nearing the end of the fiscal year. So how do we get from what the 2 sub-accounts that you sent us were ones we had locked into law. So technically, you've met the letter of the law. But certainly not the spirit of having this dialogue over these various programs. And yet we're trying to prepare our strategy for next year. We always kind of realized if there wasn't a good faith effort to honor the reporting language, we could put every one of these sublines locked into law, but that takes away the flexibility. So it's been a mutually beneficial arrangement. When can we get a spending plan that isn't just the 2 sub-accounts that constitute only 12% and that was just the USGS as an example. I mean, massive amount of every other part of Interior, it's the same story. So if the entire, massive spending plan with details versus just, this is the entire department spending plan right here. How do we address this? And what is the holdup for getting a vision for all these individual pieces that were laid out in what we put into the report language?
Well, if you talk about the vision, I mean, the one thing coming in, I mean, having spent all those decades in tech and specifically around financial and accounting systems, this federal budgeting process and the tools, I mean, it would be very easy for us to give you that 6-page sheet and just, take what's in there, increase a number a little bit, hand it to you, everybody's familiar with it, and go. But it is the systems themselves and the information and how they flow, needs an entire overhaul. And I know we can't get it done now, but certainly we're taking a look at that as we bring in a new team, a new IT team, and trying to say, because we want to have the collaborative process, we want to work with you, we want to do that, but we also want to figure out a way to make sure that we're spending dollars and getting good returns. It's not how much we spend, it's also the results that we get.
So here's the challenge. The spending plan is about FY25, which started last October 1st. So I take the point about as you produce a strategy for detailed budget for FY26, for us to have a starting point for discussion. But for FY25, all of these individual programs are going, we can't be efficient. We're suspending our design work, we're suspending our contractors, it's all going up in price, all because we don't know if our funds are going to be obliterated because they're in the report language, so you could move them from place to place. And so it's massively inefficient. And what I've heard is a theme of your desire is to be efficient. But you've got all of these sub-programs all operating inefficiently right now because you've got people standing around going, we don't know what we're doing because we don't have the money and we don't know if we're ever going to get it. How is that a good strategy?
Well, it's a necessary effort that we're going through right now, because you mentioned contractors. The explosion in the number of contractors working for Interior go way beyond the 65,000 of estimated headcount. And in some cases, it appears that we may have team members whose job is to manage contractors. And so then it leads us back to, is that work that we should be doing ourselves versus outsourcing to others? And why the huge increase in contractors in the last couple of years? Did we suddenly find it that we're unable to do this work ourselves? So there's a lot of questions that I think would be reasonable to ask, because what those answers that we'll get from looking at 25 help inform what we should put in the budget for 26. What's working, what's not, what's efficient, what are we doing internally versus outsourcing? So anyway, and with a small staff, we're asking a lot of I think
So I would take your point looking forward. When I ran nonprofits, I tried to do things in-house, not use subcontractors at all, because I could do it much more efficiently, get much more work done. I had complete control. But this is about work that's underway right now being interrupted with no idea what's happening. We have no idea how many canceled contracts. So that work, it's very inefficient. I mean, looking forward to what you want to fund next year, I take your point about this analysis, but for this FY25, what contracts are there with all of these to execute the construction work on new Shake Alert, or the new algae research, or what biologists are standing by waiting to know if they're going to complete that work? To me, it's horrifically inefficient to interrupt all of that work, nobody knowing what's happening. They don't know, and I understand that technically it is a pause, but is a pause leading to an obliteration of that program, even for the things that were in there for FY25 or so forth? Anyway, I want to make that point, that looking to the future, huge control by the executive. Looking to FY25, I'm sure there are individual items you're like, well, we want to adjust what we did in FY25. That's why we put them into report language rather than locking them into law. But this is the worst outcome, where we have no idea, and all these programs have no idea if they're getting the money. So I have heard that OMB has locked this up, preventing you from being able to actually give us a spending plan. Is that correct?
We're waiting for some of the apportionments from OMB, yes.
Can you connect with Mr. Vogt and tell him this is horrifically inefficient for FY25, and you need to be able to let these programs operate or not operate, be canceled or get their funding and not be standing around waiting or losing expertise?
Well, we're in regular communication with OMB, and again, I think perhaps when both of you are out of the room, is saying there's at the administration level. I mean, last year we spent $2,000 billion as a government more than we brought in. I mean, that's what $2 trillion is. And so, well, these numbers may seem small. I mean, each of us as a department has been asked to do something to help rein in spending to get that number. We've got an interest now passes $1 trillion. We can get that number down. We can fund everything we've talked about here today.
I will say that your spending plan has the same amount, for example, for the Geological Service as we put in, so you're not saving a damn dime. What you are doing is interrupting every sub-account and every team that's working on these different projects. So again, looking forward, I take your point. Looking at FY25, I do not.
Well, respectfully, they're connected, because understanding, for me to decide whether they should be in the budget for 26, I need to know what they're actually doing in 25, and whether we're doing it ourselves or doing it with a contractor. So while you're saying they're not connected, I think they're completely connected in terms of us having information about what would we fund going forward based on what we learn about this year's.
Well, it's hard to learn much about this year if you don't ever get a spending plan implemented, and the year is over half gone. It ends on September 30th. For example,
you understand that this is not intentional. I mean, this is like we came in on in the middle of the fiscal year. I mean, this is a transition year. This must happen in the government every 4 years.
Actually, we get a much more detailed spending plan from other administrations in transition. This is a rare exception. I'll just give,
well, this is
the
first administration that's actually trying to reduce spending instead of increase it. So maybe that's the difference.
Well, you're not the first administration that's looked for efficiencies, but my point is you're creating vast inefficiencies while you're bragging about doing efficiencies. And therefore, you really need to be honest with the American public about the damage you're doing to the institutional knowledge and the fact that people are standing around waiting for their funding, not knowing that projects interrupted and they're going up in cost. All of these are not factors you should be bragging about to the American people because they're inefficiencies. They're wasting our American money. Look to FY26, see your changes that you want, but don't come here and tell us that by interrupting programs and running up costs that you're doing something efficient.
I think.
Well, I just want to be clear,
challenge-
I'm not bragging about anything. There's no bragging going on. I mean, we all share this. We're all Americans and we're all facing the same overspending
I
problem.
just heard you say that you're the only folks in the history of the country that have looked to create lower costs, and that it's just not true.
Well-
And you are bragging about that, but you're disrupting programs and making them less efficient. I'm going to turn this back to the chair.
Yeah, I think the point that needs to be made here is when we are dealing with a full-year CR, which in my view was an awful alternative. It was the one that helped us avoid a government shutdown, which was a worse alternative. But you're stuck with the proposal. We're stuck with not knowing how you're going to implement it. And it goes back to what I have asked for, and I think the ranking member is suggesting that we've all got to have more detail to it. And I would agree, you need to be clearly focused on what is happening with FY26, but we cannot ignore where we are with FY25. And our job as appropriators here is not insignificant. We are still the ones that ultimately we have made that determination at the executive. Your role is to implement it. And so how we get through this FY25, I think, is the frustration that my colleague has pointed to. I share it. This is why we've asked about the reprogramming. What we need is to have just more openness, more detail, and I get the fact that it's really hard to be able to provide that when you don't have your folks. So we're in an awful spot. The best way that we can remedy things is just for everybody to recognize this is not a place where anybody wants to be. It's a challenge and a transition. I don't think most transitions from one administration to another are quite as rocky because typically we don't leave you with a long-term CR. You're able to walk in and know what the game plan is. And there may be minor reprogramming, but nothing to the extent that we're seeing now. So our second vote has started, and I think we're well into that. I had more things that I wanted to raise on the public safety and justice side. I worry about tribal governments competing for grants within DOJ or Homeland. As you well know, coming from your states, you have certain tribes that just have greater capacity to compete for such funds. And so we don't want this to be a situation where it's only the most sophisticated and the wealthy tribes that are able to gain access to this. I'm also worried about whether the reduction in the safety and justice line assumes a reduction in funding for PL 280 states, which is Alaska's situation. So I'd love to have more conversations with you on that. I think we've raised the issue of BIA probate enough so that you know how much of a priority that is, and making sure that we can really help to expedite that. I'm going to end my comments with just again, I think there's an excitement from folks in my state that not only you are coming to the state in a couple weeks, but Secretary Wright as well as Administrator Zeldin. I kind of gave you a pass on what can we expect when you come up. You can deliver that at the time. But I think that there is a lot of anticipation about what the executive order is actually going to translate to in terms of forward momentum that we can actually see. What's it going to mean in terms of jobs, in terms of projects moving forward? And I know that you're working aggressively to that, and believe me, it is appreciated. There are so many things within this budget, and I think as a governor who gets budgets and a businessman who gets budgets, you recognize this is a massive undertaking. I think that's why the president asked you to take it on, because he knew of the expertise that you bring to the table. But regardless of how good you are, you need folks to help you make it happen. So view us as partners here, helping to facilitate what you're trying to do. We can help you on the appropriations end, and that's certainly my desire. With that, Senator Merkley, if you had any finals, we're ready to close out.
A closing question. The President budget proposes to jettison parts of the Forest Service and put it into the Department of Interior related to a different structure for fighting fires. And the question I have is whether that is a proposal for us to consider legislatively, or if you believe you can make that reorganization without us acting legislatively.
I don't think we have a conclusive answer yet on that. If we find that it's something that we think has got deep merit but requires legislative action, we'll certainly be working with you on that. If it's something that we think deserves merit and we can execute it between Brooke Rollins and I moving forward, we'll do it the way that we can get the most efficiency. We do have some good collaboration going on at the interagency national incident center in Idaho. I mean, that's a good thing, but we've got 4 different wildland firefighting units in Interior. We've got one inside of Forest Service. We don't even have the same pay scales. The Forest Service people have got, a casualty thing if they're killed in action, or if they were or seriously injured. That doesn't exist, say, like in BIA firefighters. So we've got to figure out a way to get some unification. It doesn't mean moving people around, but we got to get some things where we have a national force that's nationally coordinated. Last year we had 124,000 acre fire in North Dakota. Sadly, 2 people died, and we were calling for federal air support on Saturday morning, and the planes arrived on Tuesday. And there was planes available, but it was the bureaucracy of decision making and the layers that are there. And so I think that there's places where we can absolutely streamline. Brooke Rollins and I held a joint event yesterday. We did a fire incident briefing together at the U.S. Forest Service. That's never happened before. And so whether it's making sure that we're providing support to those critical people, the frontline firefighters, all the way up to the top of both agencies and both departments, we're going to make sure that we've got the best wildland firefighting coordination ever before. And when we put that all together, then we may come back and go, man, we're short. We need more aircraft. We need more places. We need more people. But one thing for sure we need is more fire load management, because we're spending way too much money on the back end. I know this as being, vice chair and chair of Western Governors. We talked about fire every year for 8 years, and we're when the fuel load is building, the fires are getting bigger, and we've got to figure out a way to get more.
Let me say thank you for that details. And here's the point, is that we're all for coordination, we're all for efficiency, but I think it's the opinion of members of Congress that when you have an organization established in law, changing that organization requires a change in law. We have seen a number of agencies affected profoundly in ways that were not consistent with law. So do the planning, send us a proposal. I think we should wrestle with it. We want the fire service to be as effective as possible. It's so critical to certainly both of our states and the entire West. But what we don't want is something done without due consideration that creates more problems than it solves. And we don't want to do something that breaks the constitutional separation of powers. I guarantee you that will end up in court, and there will be pieces of that result in more difficulty than a 2-day delay on planes, which is a big issue for sure. But what if we produce a 7-day delay as a result of a poorly crafted, poorly considered reorganization? So bring us a reorganization plan. Let's do this the right way.
We'll look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
We all want to get fire right.
Yep.
Because we are all impacted. With that, the
you.
committee stands adjourned, and thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.